Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish.
This week we've been talking about this idea of peace and having peace in our lives, peace within, peace out without, just having this peace be part of who we are and the way that we equate our lives. I don't believe we can have the vibrant life that we want to have if we're constantly in this state of bumping up against stuff. If we feel chaotic inside or chaotic on the outside, we have to. These are the things that we have to go for. But today I wanted to talk about empathy in general, because I think empathy is bringing peace to others, and sometimes others who are in a really poor way. You've heard people say before, "Oh, I'm an empath," and all of that. And I think, I think we are all empaths at some degree, but some of us need to be taught how to be empathetic. This is a gift that God gives us, as I believe with all of my heart, as complex human beings, as abstract thinkers, the ability to conceive of other people's feelings and needs and wants and desperate lack. It's the ability for us to do good. This is how all the humanitarians in the world ever came to be, was simply by having somebody with empathy understand what it is, what's going on, and then be able to offer help. This is how this whole thing works. Hi, Alice. I'm glad you're here. But oftentimes too, we've got empathy, we've got compassion, we've even got consolation, we've got sympathy, and a lot of times these things can all be sort of merged into each other, and although they're quite distinctly different. Because compassion really means to suffer together. It comes about when you witness another person's suffering and you're motivated to help relieve it if you can. Hi, Cheryl. Susan, good to see you. To relieve it if you can. So, having compassion would be, for example, if you come across an animal with his foot stuck in a trap or something, or you see something trapped, you let it go. That's compassion, is to relieve the suffering of that little animal. Whereas sympathy is, you understand it. It's something maybe you've gone through before. That's what sympathy is. When you send sympathy cards, you're saying, I understand what you're going through. You maybe have literally understood that you may have also lost a spouse, or you may have also lost a child, God forbid, or even a pet, that you understand what this person is going through. You understand it, you've felt it, because you've also done it yourself. Whereas empathy is the ability to feel what another person is feeling without having necessarily experienced it. So you don't have to experience empathy to experience empathy. You don't have to experience another person's pain to be able to feel it. You just know that, you just think, what would this be like if it were me? But we're going to get into what it is to become empathetic, because I think a lot of times this is a thing. This lack of empathy holds us back from being the peacemakers that we can possibly be in other people's lives, and the peacemaking that we can give to one another. Peacemaking is more than just making things nice and calm or whatever. Peacemaking is also about making sure that everybody feels included, and that there's kindness, there's gentleness, and there's actual human kindness happening. and not just like, yeah, shut up. And, here's a bouquet of flowers. Sorry for your loss. And boom, out. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be those type of women, do we? I believe we're called to something much higher. There's a guy named Ken Sand of Peacemaker Ministries, and he has this really great acrostic for the word empathy. And I want to go through all of that. Briefly, it's enlist all your faculties. 2 is move in physically, verbally, and emotional ways. 3 is to pray for discernment. 4 is to think deliberately. 5 is to help in meaningful ways. And 6 is to yield your convenience, your pride, and your resources to help someone else. And let's talk about this because it is a key component to being able to be a peacemaker. I believe wise women understand this. And I believe, too, that it's up to us to understand and to be present with empathy and say, how can I be more like this? I believe that's, that was what Jesus did on this planet. He empathized, he understood, he didn't marginalize. He was actually, he took the marginalized in, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, he loved up the marginalized. He empathized with their plight in life and loved them anyway. I believe that's our call too, if we're going to be like him. So empathy is a key component to be able to be a peacemaker, obviously. And we're wired to be like this, believe it or not. But I think sometimes we don't develop this ability to be so because we're caught up in our own stuff. We don't have time for that. We just want to go to the next thing, and we shut someone down rather than empathize with them, rather than loving them up, rather than giving them our precious time and listen and an actual listening ear. So we can see empathy, though, in action daily when we see things, like these wonderful organizations that do things to really help people who are suffering greatly. You see planes getting loaded up with, relief supplies, with water and medical stuff and food, going to Haiti or wherever there was some horrible catastrophic event. This is empathy in action, going out to help and going out to love. It's compassion. We see this. So let's look at this acrostic again, and let's see how we can unpack it a little bit and see what applies for you. Where could you maybe be a little bit more empathetic? I also believe the other thing that I believe is that empathy gives us such a gracious amount of patience, doesn't it? When we are empathetic, and even with our little children, sometimes that's really hard because we just lose our everything with them, don't we? We're tired of the voice. Oh, if they will just, mommy, it just clamp it down. Just clamp it down. But let's talk about creating more of this gift of empathy, sowing the seed that's already inside of you, watering it so that you can show up being the peacemaker that you have always been, right? Because peacemaking comes in empathy, and empathy comes in peacemaking as well. And this is how we love. Number 1 is to enlist all of your resources. That a lot of time is time. It's time to listen to what's really going on. And it's asking and looking at how would I feel about this? What would I think? How would I go alongside? How can I help this person? And not quick Band-Aid, fix it so that you can get this off your list. It's not a check it off the list kind of a thing, but it is instead a reminder that it requires your attention. So I think about this too, because I remember, for me, I think about in my life, the time where, when my mom was dying, that required a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of empathy and sadness and all kinds of stuff going on, right? But I remember there was a time where I knew that she was scared. I could feel her fear. And she had this, what they call a death rattle, this death breath. And it was also awful to hear. And it was scary. And my kids, it just dropped them right to their knees. They were crying and really upset about it. And that was a time where I moved close to her and I held her in my arms like a baby. I had her head cradled in the crook of my left arm. And I kept looking at her and saying to her that she doesn't need to be afraid, that I am with her, that God, she's going to go home and be with God, and that she gets to take my love with her and I get to keep hers too. And I said that about my sister and my brother as well. And I said this over and over and over again in the hope that it would give her an opportunity to let go of the fear, because I actually felt her fear. Now, the nurse was saying to me at the time, well, sometimes this is just what they do, because hospice nurses, this is something that they're used to. But I could feel that fear. And I believe that was empathy that was tapping me on the shoulder and saying, no, you know something a little bit different. You don't, that was the one time I was like listening to her, but then I knew in my heart of hearts that this is what this was going to require. I have no idea how many hours I held my mother like that. I have no idea. But it was what I was called to do at the time. And empathy requires you take the time to do something like this. It takes the time that you pour out yourself. And we're all called at such a time to do something like this. Not all the time. I mean, obviously, nobody has that kind of capacity, but we do what we need to do. We enlist our resources. Number 2 is we move in physically, verbally, and emotional ways. We sit close, we pat a hand. We say, oh, we've been thinking about you. We actually listen. We have a neighbor whose husband just passed away from ALS, we had a chance to go over there, bring her dinner, and we had a chance for her to just to be with her. We're not close. She's our neighbor, but she's lovely, and we see her all the time with her dog, and my dog and our dogs like each other. And it was just like, how can I show up in a way that is loving and kind and also appropriate? We brought her dinner and sat down and had a glass of wine with her and just chatted for a little bit. And that in and of itself is enough. This is how neighbors are. I remember, way back in the day, that's how neighbors were all the time. We'd borrow a cup of sugar from each other. We'd, borrow tools from each other's garages and what have you. Now we just drive into the garage and don't even know who our neighbors are. If you ask me who my neighbors are, when we moved from Boulder, I couldn't tell you any of our neighbors' names. None of them. Because we didn't get to know our neighbors like we used to. It's a little different here, so I'm really thankful for that. And also think, if somebody starts to cry, it's quite all right if somebody starts to cry, and it's all right to share that emotion with them, to share a smile or a chuckle with them as well. But that's being fully present. That's being loving. That's I had an opportunity to share a memory of my neighbor's husband with her, because that's one of my first people that I met when I was there, always walking their dog and just cheerful and wonderful. And, I got to share that with her, and I could tell she appreciated that. So those are the ways that we can, be present physically, emotionally, and verbally. Number 3 is to pray for discernment. I believe that empathy is reserved for those who are willing to go that extra mile, because you can't become empathetic just like that. You look for opportunity to serve, because empathy oftentimes is in service to another, and it's in service to seeing and wanting to help with the pain, or at least help with the burden of the pain. And we have the willing to do that. So one of the prayers that we can have it, and I've had for my neighbor is, asking for eyes to see and ears to hear. How can I be of service? How can I help? How can I love? That's just something that I think would be a beautiful regular thing that we'd want to do. It changes, I think, the whole dynamic, and it doesn't put us into this place of over volunteering, overdoing this or overdoing that. It's moment by moment, and as the moment comes and as the moment's presented to you, then that's a way that you can ask for discernment, pray for it. Number 4 is ask caring questions to that person. I've done this before, and I know you've done this before. But, we always say, hey, how are you doing? Well, But what if you said instead, and going back to number 2, like physically, and you just touch that person's arm. Hey, how are you doing? Really? How are you doing really? When you say, how are you doing really, you're giving permission to tell the truth and to say what's on their mind, to give space for a conversation that maybe needs to have of some pent up stuff that other person needs to do it. And it's a really good question because A, it gives permission, and 2, it's letting that person know that you are there for them right there at that moment. And then, you can continue to have a conversation if appropriate. But, this is how we open the door to giving that how are you doing really could also be, no, really, I'm doing fine. I'm really doing fine. It's been rough, but I've got this, and, I had all this help at the house and this, whatever it is, and allow for that too, because, you can offer the invitation. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be accepted. And that's cool too. Number 5 is to think deliberately. Discernment, logic, emotion, abstract thinking, planning. This is all part of your prefrontal cortex. This is what makes us intelligent, remarkable beings, separates us from, the rest of the mammal kingdom, really. But what if we started asking our questions? Some really good questions like, why is she saying that? Or why is this happening? That's what I went with my mom. Even though I got shut down, not shut down, but just say, oh no, this is the normal part of the death process, the death rattle, explaining all of that. Well, that's an explanation too. But on the other side of it, I'm her daughter, and so I can go a step closer and a step deeper than just this is the medical terminology for what it is. Instead, go into the place of going a step further. And that's what this is all about. Henry Nouwen said, to console doesn't mean to take away the pain, but rather to say, you are not alone. I am with you, and together we carry the burden. Isn't that beautiful? And I've read a few Henry Nouwen books, and I can highly, highly recommend them. They're beautiful. And it really does talk about just this growing closer to God, forgiveness, and what all of these things are about. But, you can go walk somebody's dog. You can go take their trash for them. You can go do something for an elderly forgotten neighbor maybe that you have. There's a lot of things that can happen. Being neighborly is a forgotten art, I believe. And part of being that really good neighbor is being the person to greet them and to meet them where they are. Number 7 is to yield your convenience, pride, and resources. This is a type of a thing because it's a non-agenda. You don't have a real, you don't have any agenda really, do you? Not if you're going to love fully, not if it's going to be a little inconvenient and somebody just wants to cry and to be with you and to let it out or whatever. Part of our peacemaking ability is to be that shoulder, is to be that sounding board or whatever, within limits, with boundaries. You have to obviously do this, but when it's time and when you're called upon this, it's somebody recognizing your humanity that they can attach to, if you will, that they can relate to. That's a beautiful thing. And I think it's also true foot washing. What would Jesus do? Jesus came and he washed feet. He came and he was humbled over and over and over and over and over again. And the things that he did confounded, the Pharisees and what have you. And the reason it confounded them is because it was all simple acts of love, simple acts of compassion, of peace, and of willingness to put himself on the bottom rung. I don't think we need to always put ourselves on the bottom rung. I don't believe that's what the call is. But the call is for us as peacemakers, as to be these women, is to see a need and meet it as best we can when it comes up. And if you feel a call in your heart, and even if a nurse is telling you, no, that's just part and parcel, but you feel like you need to go a step further, do it. Because I believe that's what Jesus would do. And I also believe that this is what peacemakers do. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and daughters of God. I think that's pretty awesome. I don't know about you, but that's what I want in my life. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful for you. We can use this in our daily life. I bet you've got somebody in your life that could use a little compassion from you, that could use a little empathy, and that could use maybe a touch. So if so, peace be with you. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.